Brian Lair on WNYC. Once a month for a year on the show, we're taking some time to pay attention to one of the most important, if often overlooked, parts of New York City and surrounding areas, the parts that are not man-made, the plants and animals that sustain us. Last month, we talked about the spring migration of wildlife via our local waterways, think eels, horseshoe crabs, and other aquatic life forms that we talked about last month. Today, we'll look up at the sky. From March to June, New York City's airspace belongs to all sorts of insects and birds traveling north, as you certainly know. With me now to tell us more about these critters, though, where to spot them and how to keep them safe, is Marielle Anzelone, urban botanist and ecologist and the founder of New York City Wildflower Week, and Christian Cooper, science and comics writer, host of the National Geographic TV series, Extraordinary Birder, New York City Bird Alliance board member, and author of the 2023 book, Better Living Through Birding, Notes from a Black Man in the Natural World. Hey, Christian. Hi, Marielle. Thanks for doing this with us.
Hi, Brian. Glad to be here.
Good morning.
Marielle, we tend to think of habitat as something on the ground, I think. But the sky over New York is also a habitat, at least for a few months a year. Who's using the sky right now, and where are they headed?
Oh my gosh, so many different kinds of wildlife. So it's really incredible to think about. You think about New York City right on the ground, you walk in, you see something. But the Atlantic Flyway actually connects New York City to the larger planet. Species come in from southern parts of the globe and fly over New York City, and they come and rest. So our natural areas are important spaces for them to take respite. But we have birds, we have bats, we have butterflies, we even have dragonflies that come over New York City, and the migrations have been happening, so interesting, for thousands of years. So this is something that everyone should be paying attention to.
Christian, let's zoom in on your specialty, the birds. Where are these migrants coming from? Are they mostly more or less from the same place? And what's New York's role in their journey?
No, they're coming from all over, from the southern part of the world, as Marielle mentioned. Some may be coming from Florida or may have wintered on the Gulf Coast. Some are coming from Mexico. Some are coming from the Caribbean. Some are coming from South America, from as far south as Argentina. So these birds are they've spent the winter in various places, which are just as much home to them as their breeding grounds up north, which we think of as their home. But then, the days get longer and they start getting an itch to move, and they migrate when they get the good winds, and they fly up the coast, as Marielle said, up the Atlantic Flyway for us, and run smack into New York City. And they need to rest, they need to refuel, and we get the benefit of getting to see them before they move on to parts further north, or some of them, a few of them, stick around and breed here.
Do you have a favorite species or two? I don't know if that's like asking, which is your favorite child to ask a birder. Do you have a favorite species or two? But any that you want to shout out that people might look or listen for?
I do. There are these birds in the east in particular called warblers. They are small insectivores, very active. I think of them as butterflies with personality. And in the east, we get like some 30, 35 different species of warblers that you could possibly see. And so when they arrive, we get all excited. That's how we index our spring as birders, is by how many warblers, different varieties of warblers we get. And there's one in particular called the Blackburnian warbler, which has a day-glow fiery orange throat. So when he arrives, in the male, it's a bright orange throat. So when he arrives, I get super excited, and I can't get enough of him. I did not see one this morning, unfortunately, but I did yesterday. So,
do you do bird calls, by the way? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you do, can you do a warbler?
Most of the warblers have very high-pitched voices, so it's very hard for a human voice to imitate them. But there's one called the hooded warbler, which has a clear whistled song. So if my whistling is, I haven't tried to whistle today, but I'll give it a try. That's a hooded warbler song.
How about you, Marielle? Have any favorites that people should watch for or listen for?
Oh, for birds? Gosh, you know what, Brian? I feel like there are a lot of people that love birds. I try to keep, I look up every once in a while, but I'm mostly looking at wildflowers on the ground, believe it or not. But one bird that I saw once that was really beautiful was a northern parula, which I'm sure Chris knows more about, but it was really beautiful. But I think one of the things that's so interesting is just how many birds come through New York City and that it's such an exciting part of city life that more people should be paying attention to.
There are
Christian,
so many.
go
No, I
ahead.
was just going to say there are so many birders who, just got started with the pandemic, and they come up to us to reinforce what Mariel just said, and they come up to us old timers, and they're like, "I had no idea this was happening under my nose all the time,
Mhm.
and it's amazing and it's wonderful. And what have I missed?" And I'm like, "Welcome to the club."
Listeners, anybody have a question about spring migrations, the airborne edition this time? 212-433 WNYC. This can be a tip if you have like a favorite birding spot or a butterfly story. We haven't even talked about the butterflies yet. Or you found a bird that hit your window. Call or text us at 212-433 WNYC, or just ask Christian or Marielle a question. 212-433 9692 as we continue this once a month series that we're doing for a year. What are we up to, Marielle? Is this month 3? I think we did flowers and then the waterborne migration and now
Yes.
and now the airborne migration, right?
Yes, yes. So we talked, the first month was about kind of like timing of phenology. So it was the way that the natural world kind of keeps record of a calendar. It's a calendar, that you'd see outside your window. And so really spring migration is further sort of marker of phenology, right? And so Christian, of course, knows really well. This is how he keeps track of his calendar when the birds are coming through. And so the birds have this kind of internal clock by which they know, okay, it's time for me to get a move on. Yeah, so and now, we're just thinking about what else is in the skies. Birds are so well known and beloved as they should be. But there are other creatures that use the skies. Bats are one that we don't really think about. And people may find them creepy, but in fact, bats are so important with regard to keeping insect populations down and being in partnership with local farmers so that they don't have to use as many pesticides on their crops. And then in spring, one of the butterflies that I really love to see is the red admiral. That is a springtime migrant. We think about monarchs as being migratory, and you see numbers of them in the fall. Now, this time of year, the monarchs are kind of singularly going through their generations northward. But the ones that you see in big numbers for spring are red admirals. They're really pretty. It's a dark butterfly with red orange bands, and you'll see them in large numbers as they migrate north from warmer regions.
For people who may think of a butterfly different from a bird as something that just kind of flutters around, in a small area, how far do butterflies migrate?
Oh gosh, well, it depends on the species, but I think one of the migratory routes that people know well, and they're really iconic, are monarch butterflies. And of course, monarchs overwinter in central Mexico in very high altitude mountain range. And they all overwinter there. But then as they travel northward, they have three separate routes through which they travel in the United States. One is far west through California, one is sort of in the Midwestern US, and then there's us, which is the Atlantic Flyway over, the far east.
Holly in Rockland County, you're on WNYC. Hi, Holly.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I live in Rockland County, and we're very fortunate. We get a lot of beautiful birds, but we have a lot of glass. We have very big glass windows, and I often get birds kind of smashing into the glass. I don't know if there's anything that can be done to minimize that or prevent that.
Christian, do you know?
There's absolutely something you can do to minimize that or prevent that. You can put some decals on the glass. Frequently, you'll see people put up silhouettes of hawks and other raptors in flight because that's like a danger signal to the birds. It's like putting up warning. And so that will alert them to the fact that there's glass there. But even less intrusive, there are ways to put up, sort of either marks yourself or a clear vinyl applique to the glass with just sort of a slight dot pattern that's almost imperceptible to the human eye, but the birds see it, absolutely. And now they're even manufacturing bird-safe glass, which is designed with that in mind, so that they have an element that the birds can see, but we humans barely notice, if at all. And so that will cut way, way down on your collisions.
Are there so many bird deaths in their migrations in the New York area? Because I've seen New York described as a sink for migratory birds, meaning more birds die here than a lot of other places because more fly through than the city's role as a stopover can sustain. Is that because of a lot of tall glass buildings, or is that for some other reason?
There's a couple of reasons. Part of it is light. And part of it is the glass. Those are the two main things that make our city particularly dangerous with the tall buildings. And there's actually legislation in the works to deal with the lights, and legislation we've already passed in the city to help make the glass less of a problem. Again, requiring the use of bird-safe glass in new construction in the city. So that's great. But those are the two big elements. And one thing, just as an example, in the fall, when 9/11 comes around and there's that tribute in light with the two beautiful towers of light, almost a ghostly image of what we lost and of who we lost shining up into the sky. But what people don't realize is that 9/11 happened right smack in the middle of the peak of the fall migration when the birds are heading back down south. And so every year when those lights go up, those lights disrupt the birds, many of whom migrate at night, and they get trapped in those beams of light. They get confused, and many of them end up dying in that process. So actually, New York City Bird Alliance worked with the Tribute and Light people, and they have counters who go there and watch the lights, volunteer counters who spend all night watching when the Tribute of Light is lit up. And then when the birds reach a certain concentration, the lights get switched off just long enough for the birds to disperse so that they aren't killed by that light source. But lights and glass are the big problems.
Interesting. I think Joan in Manhattan has a question that probably a lot of people are wondering about. Joan, you're on WNYC. Hi.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering, is there an ideal temperature range for birds to live in? You know, I always heard that birds fly south in the winter, and I said, oh, sure, it gets so cold here. It never occurred to me that they have to keep flying south because when it gets warm, they come back up north. So what triggers them coming back up north? And is global warming having any effect on the birds? Is it confusing them in any way?
Thank you, John. Christian, that one's for you, too.
There are so many elements to that question, so I'll try to be concise. First of all, the most important thing to remember is that birds migrate because of food supply. It's not because of cold. Indirectly, it's because the cold affects their food supply. But if they have a food source, the birds can actually make it. Because remember, they've got feathers, and the primary role of feathers is not flying, but as a down coat to keep them warm. So there are plenty of birds that winter over, and so it's really about food supply. What triggers them to know they have to leave, because remember, they're down in the south, they don't know what the weather is up here, is the length of the days. And that really tells them, oh, it's time to go. And then, their hormones kick in and like, I gotta go, and they take off. And there was probably a third part to that question, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, I'll add a third part. Why don't they stay in New York? The snowbirds I know live in Florida in the winter, but they don't go to Canada. They don't just stop in New York and move on. Obviously, some go down from Canada. But is New York not a temperate enough climate for the birds for the whole summer?
It's not about climate. Again, it's not about the temperature. It's about the resources they need to raise the next generation.
I see.
And what these birds are doing is they are going to places where there is seasonal opportunity. So in the summertime, wherever they're going, there are the particular bugs and the particular habitat that they need to be able to raise their young successfully. And that's where they're headed. And it's an opportunity that's only their part of the year. And because birds have the ultimate mobility, they can fly, they can go any place in the world, that gives them the ability, when that resource is not available, to go someplace else. And that's how migration happens.
Some texts that are coming in. One says, please tell fellow listeners that there's a petition for New York State to require all new buildings to use bird safe glass. So since that came up before, that's a good thing to pass along for those of you who are interested. Another listener writes, a good place to look for birds. We always look in the sky around mile marker 104 on I-87. So that would be the New York State Thruway. And mile marker 104, if it starts at the Bronx-Westchester line, I guess that would be a little north of New Paltz, around Kingston, I guess. So mile marker 104, they do have those mile markers on the side of the road if you're driving the Thruway. And the listener writes, there is a bald eagle nest somewhere around there, and we see a bald eagle around 45% of the time. Want to get one more thing in for you, Marielle, because I see that bats are also in this category, and a lot of bats also die. Should people be concerned about there not being too many bats?
Well, with bats, yes. So there is something that's called white nose syndrome, which has turned out to be this kind of fungal infection that bats get. And it's that it disturbs them while they are overwintering. While they're hibernating, it kind of wakes them up. And so they don't have enough kind of fat resources to survive through hibernation. It disturbs their numbers. They end up lowers their numbers. The problem with that is that, like I mentioned earlier, farmers work in concert with bats. Bats do so many things for us, these kinds of ecosystem services that we don't have any way to measure and think about economically. But bats take care of insect populations for farmers for free. When bat numbers plummet, as they have in New York State, farmers use more pesticides. And in fact, there's a study that shows that this increase in pesticide use by farmers has a negative effect on human mortality, so that these pesticides get into the environment and are, consumed in some way by people, maybe through drinking water. I don't remember off the top of my head, and it affects insect birth rates, human infant birth rates. So These things have a direct effect on our health and well-being. So it's something that we really need to be thinking about, but we don't.
All right, listeners, we're continuing this once a month for a year on the show. This was episode 3, taking some time to pay attention to the not man-made aspects, the plants and the animals that sustain us in greater New York. Marielle Anzelone will keep coming on with us and keep bringing interesting guests along with her. Like for this month, it has been Christian Cooper, who is the host of the National Geographic TV series Extraordinary Birder, New York City Bird Alliance board member, and the author of the 2023 book, Better Living Through Birding, Notes from a Black Man in the Natural World. Thank you both. This was great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.